And now for further analysis, Mr. Gospel Obele, a research and development economist, joins us now. Hello, Obele. Good to have you join us. Hello, Gospel. Can you hear me? All right, we're joined by Gospel Obele, and we're looking at the recently released Consumer Price Index report, talking about the NBS saying that Nigeria's inflation rose to its highest level.
I can't seem to hear you well.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, that's good. Now, let's look at what we have here. According to the recently released report by the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's inflation rose to its highest level in 11 months. Now, that was from 16.82% that was recorded in April to 17.71% in May. Now, when this report got out, how did you react to it?
Well, there are so many narratives we call that it's a global issue. Inflation is rising amongst countries now globally.
All right, if you can you hear me?
So yeah, I can hear you well.
All right, do go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the United Kingdom also sees the same pattern of inflation growth, same also as the Eurozone and all of that. On the global...
All right, that's Gospel Obele. I guess it's a network glitch, and he's been talking about the fact that this is not akin to Nigeria. It's not something that only Nigeria is experiencing at the moment. It's a global phenomenon, and with a lot of other areas, other parts of the world suffering the same fate. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Okay, I guess we'll have to wait that out. But in the meantime, we're looking at the increase, that's talking about the 17.71% inflation rate recorded for the month of May. And Gospel is reacting to that, saying that it's a global phenomenon. It's something that's happening everywhere. And then he was trying to help us make sense of that. Can you hear me now?
Okay, I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Great. All right. So like I mentioned, yes, it's a global conversation, like just to create the background of this narrative, but also to state that nations who are already at the vulnerable stage of this impact will get to experience, the inflationary effect a lot more harder. So that's why we see that hike from 15% almost in April 2022, sorry, almost in March in 2022, to 17.71% in May. All right, so Nigeria is technically at the vulnerable stage of economic impact, and a lot of these dynamics has been hinged the fact that the Russia-Ukraine war doesn't seem as though it will be settling anytime soon. So global supply chains are broken due to the Russia-Ukraine war. Climate change is also setting in Vietnam and other countries. All right, the emerging lockdown and COVID-19 conversations as well in China. So when you put all these things together, and the fact that Nigeria is a very, very broken and vulnerable economy, we see that we will have what we call transferred costs, locally. And also bring the fact that pre-elections are here, insecurity is also on the rise, uncertainties as well. It also hampers heavily on local supply chain dynamics and food prices. So what we'll see is a double blow effect, coming from the global Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19 and climate change conversation, and the fact that the local dynamics or local narratives geared towards pre-elections are a bit disturbing. So we expect supply chains and food prices and as well to react accordingly.
Well, how much of a challenge is the Russian-Ukraine war to Nigeria? I mean, how are we really directly impacted?
It's a very big challenge. It's a very big challenge. First of all, some of the key ingredients, that are used globally are produced in either Russia or Ukraine, like sunflower, like wheat, like grain, and all of these key ingredients, or they are produced in Russia and Ukraine. Also to add that other second-level products or commodities are either produced in these countries or they have a part of the supply chain tied to this country. Russia is a major player, strategic player in the Eurozone. Let's not forget that as well. And one of the major influencers when it comes to production of oil production and all of that. So the fact that the crisis disrupts the major core of raw materials and production, within the Eurozone axis is also a major impact, that's reflecting in manufacturing and the likes globally. We've also seen narratives where major institutions in the United States, in China, and co, have sort of like withdrawn or paused on their operations in other markets due to the uncertainty, of supply chain dynamics as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. So major ingredients used globally for production and manufacturing are produced either in these two countries or by secondary indirect level impact. And we see that trickle down to Nigeria because we're heavily an import-dependent economy. And that means that once global supply chains are broken, it means global manufacturing value chains are also broken. And that would also impact on the prices of goods and services globally. As we've seen in the World Bank data, that commodity prices have also hiked. All right, so when you factor that in through an imported inflation narrative, then that begins to make a lot of sense. Same also with oil production, same also with local manufacturing and all that. A lot of our local manufacturers still need raw materials from Europe, to boost their local manufacturing. Nigeria is not yet at a place where we are competitive enough as a nation to produce the raw materials at the most, at very good, at the most proper state, ready for value processing. All right, so we're not yet there. A lot of our manufacturers still need to import their raw materials and the like. So when you factor these things in, you begin to see the economics of imported inflation reflected in our numbers.
Okay, now I was going to ask you to what do we owe that tag of a vulnerable economy, but I think the explanation you gave already answers that question.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, it's increased the lending rate by 150 basis points, and I was going to hope that this will address the heightening inflation. Is that working right now? Is it serving the purpose in any way?
Well, clearly it's not yet. So two things are happening here. When policies are introduced, due to the nature of how policies work, there's always a lag effect. Lag effect means that you may not see the impact immediately, you may see the impact immediately. For conversations like interest rates, the whole announcement and all that we need to permeate through the economy and give it 1-2 months before you see the impact. But then again, to say that the idea of increasing interest rate by the central bank, even by the Fed, not just the central bank, was based on the fact that they wanted to reduce inflation. But we've also seen global inflation rising so fast. And that's because I think there's a major challenge globally, not just to the central bank, of monetary policy institutions thinking they can use one monetary policy instrument to solve a global narrative or a global problem. The global problem here is that inflation is not being impacted by money supply. Inflation is being impacted by broken supply chains, COVID-19 impact, change in climate change, as well as the Russian-Ukraine war. So those are elements that are beyond monetary economics and elements beyond interest rates. So when you think of all of that, these are core elements that disrupt the real sector. So the real sector is already broken on core fundamentals outside monetary economics. So trying to use interest rates as a tool to correct a structural issue globally, I do not think it's a very intelligent move. I don't think it's a sustainable move. And to speak to these things are the fact that global inflation is currently rising, and then inflation in Nigeria is also rising. So I don't see so much as an effective policy. I think it's more around all of the stakeholders and need to come together.
Can you hear me, Gospel? Gospel, can you hear me? I mean, he was saying something quite interesting, talking about the fact that the monetary policy instrument isn't enough to address this issue, because he's saying that this is something that's happening at the core. We're looking at the core sectors of the economy breaking down, and he said a lot of things about the breakdown in production, breakdown in a lot of other things, and for him, he feels that having a monetary policy instrument isn't intelligent. So can you hear me now? Okay, I was going to ask him that if that isn't intelligent, then what is the intelligent thing to do? What are the things we're supposed to do? What are these countries, what are these banks supposed to do to address the issues at the moment? Gospel, can you hear me now? Okay, and then, well, basically, yeah. I guess he's back. Can you hear me?
Very clearly. I got a question as well.
Okay, please go ahead then.
So yeah, when I say it's not intelligent, I don't mean it's the wrong policy, right? So it's important to state that. So a policy can be right as a solution because based on history and historical impact, this is what has worked as a solution. So it can be right in that regard. But intelligence may mean that it may not be systematically correct within the new order of things. All right, so they are very two different things. So in my own context, I want to think of how can we use what we've always used, and find a way to have other complementary instruments that can co-enable, all right, that can co-enable reduce the inflationary impact. And that's my own thought of what an intelligent policy should look like within the times we're in. And the fact that a lot of governments and institutions are not getting it right shows that there is a lot of problem in how we think globally and locally around the new world order. So that's a lot around my takeaway on that conversation. So interest rates are good, but you need a more holistic stakeholder approach and stakeholder instrumentation, focused in solving these key problems. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. And then let's break this down further. The urban inflation rate actually increased to 18.24% year on year. And then on the other hand, we had the rural inflation rate, which also increased. The rural inflation rate increased also. And now the question is, why is there an increase in the rural inflation rate, seeing that some of the indices affecting inflation are not even present in the rural areas?
Every economy is an economy. What I mean is that when you talk about economy, you really cannot dissect urban from rural. If there's increased food prices, it affects everybody. Inflation does not know who lives in the urban space and who lives in the rural space, right? So when the price of tomatoes increases now, the price will not be increased only in the urban space. It will naturally reflect across board. What it just means is that the poor and the shrinking middle class are increasingly trapped, and that's a big catch here. I think that's what we need to begin to focus on the condition going forward. So inflation is inflation. It's a very, very funny and it's really very wicked and stubborn variable, because when it begins to permeate, it could spread, especially when it permeates heavily on food. And because the structure around food inflation right now is so resilient and core around fundamentals, we will see that impact permitted all through both in rural and urban. This is the same narrative in the US. This is the same narrative in the UK. If you follow the news closely, you realize that leaders now are worried around how increase in energy prices may be permeating to the rural economy and all that. So it's a condition that's happening. Inflation is no respecter of if you're a rural economy based person, or because when you talk about food, everybody eats food, everybody needs clothing, everybody needs shelter, everybody needs transportation. So the effect permeates through across board. The only big problem here is that it's increasing those who are trapped, in the poverty, below the poverty line and all that.
All right, now that you've talked about the poverty line, we're looking at the continued rise in the prices of food, among other factors, which of course has pushed inflation to 19.5% year on year, food inflation rather to 19.5% year on year. And now this represents a 1.13% uptick compared to the 18.37% recorded in the previous month. Now, my first question to you is, what is the impact of this on an average Nigerian, the rising cost of food? And is there an end in sight to even begin with?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The rising cost of food simply means a rising cost of living. And that's because we're even looking at cost of living from the basic necessities, right? So if you look at what are the basic food, shelter, and clothing, right? If there's an increased cost on any of these three items, then you can say that there's a rise in cost of living. So for the average Nigerian, it's going to be much more expensive buying food. It's going to be much more expensive buying food ingredients, and we're just going to see a lot of rise in many other things, from that angle, because a lot of food ingredients and even non-food ingredients permeate through as raw materials, either for food or non-food items. So, and inflation has a way of always spreading to other things, based on artificial scarcity, demand, and other narratives and all that. So, rise in food prices also be the rise in transportation and mobilities and all that. So, it simply means that the average Nigerian is going to go through a lot more to have a life on a daily basis, which simply means that those who are poor, or those who are even the middle class, will find a hard time making basic choices such as what to eat, when to eat, and all of those dynamics around that. And it's a bit worrisome because it just creates a trap where people cannot live beyond to aspire and do more about their lives, but they are caught in the trap trying to live that on a daily basis, or get past basic necessities.
Well, that's quite a scary situation you just painted. But then, are there low-hanging fruits? Is there something that can be done in the immediate to ameliorate or just to address this issue so we don't have more people sinking deeply into poverty?
Yeah, I mean, there are low-hanging fruits. The low-hanging fruits would have just been to get some economic enablers running. This is not really difficult. If the government of the day Nigeria wants to do it, they will do it. It's just that they are driven more on political correctness than economic reforms. All right, and these reforms are not difficult, right? There are a lot of rice mills in Lagos, for instance. Okay, let's not even go to rice. Let's go to oil. You have a lot of refineries that are not working. All right, if you get at least 2 working before the end of the year, all right, you will be able to cut down by half your fuel purchase or petrol PMS purchase globally, and that way you reduce by half the global impact or effect of that on the average Nigerian. So it already relaxes a lot of things and it reduces the impact of some sort. It also helps to work around logistics and all that. But in my own simple opinion, the only best way forward is to go sustainable on the structural elements, which means that we need to enable SMEs, we need to fix power. If you fix power, Nigerians will have no business at the petrol stations, and that's because close to 80% of the demand who use PMS services household.
Gospel, we can't hear him, but of course I guess he was already rounding up on that particular note, saying if we fix power, well, a lot of Nigerians will have no business at the filling stations. Thank you so much, Gospel Obele, for sharing your thoughts with us on the show.
The value of the currency, and on the competitive level, that can become sustainable for productivity as well.
Okay, can you please take that again? At some point we couldn't hear you.
Yes, I was saying that if you fix power, all right, you reduce dependence on PMS for households, dependence on PMS by households. Households become more productive, all right? Businesses will become more profitable. There'll be a lot more cash flow. People will become more richer in terms of the quality of disposable income. The naira will become more stronger because at this pace, you've powered your local economy to become more productive. And what that simply means is that you can now get more businesses to produce. And once they produce value out, you can sell them and earn more foreign exchange. And that keeps the naira at a very, very valuable standpoint. And once that continues for a period of 3 to 4, 5 years, Nigeria will get to a point where the cost of living will not be so much of an impact on the average Nigerian.
Thank you so much, Gospel Obele, research and data development economist. Thanks for your thoughts on the show today.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I thank you for coming on the show and thanks for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well. Yeah, have a great day.
You too. Do enjoy the rest of the day.